A very good morning to all present. It is indeed an honor and privilege to welcome you all to the CII Conference on Sustainable Development and Health Challenges in India. I would request Mr. S. Vijay Iyer, Managing Director, Rio Tinto, India, to give his opening remarks.
Good morning. Honorable Member of Parliament, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Mrs. Seema Arora, Deputy Director General CII, distinguished participants. Very good morning to you. I feel very privileged to speak to you on behalf of CII today and welcome you to this conference on sustainable development and health challenges in India. The CII has been playing a very proactive role in bringing together different actors across the business world, government, academia, civil society, to facilitate solutions to key challenges. It has taken up the challenge to focus efforts of Indian industry towards the UN SDGs. Last month, we had convened a conference on key partnerships necessary to channel coordinated action on the SDGs. Today, this platform will hopefully bring us together to share knowledge and craft actions on important health goals. We have all heard about health being wealth. We have heard about an ounce of prevention being better than a pound of cure. These are timeless proverbs, but they are as true today as they were in times past. And many of these sentiments are reflected in the Sustainable Development Goals. There are essentially 4 goals that are directly engaging us on health issues in the UN SDGs. There is the SDG number 3, good health and well-being, SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities, and SDG 13 on climate action. 3 and 6 on health and water and sanitation are fairly straightforward, but 11 and 13 merit some explanation. And we'll come to that in a minute. Before I get into that, I just wanted to introduce my company, Rio Tinto, which is a major global mining company with a deep commitment to sustainability. My company consciously embraces technology and best practice to minimize impact on the environment and ecosystems. As you know, mining is potentially a environmentally destructive activity, so everything that we can do to use technology, best practice to minimize the impact on environment and ecosystems we do. And we also take extraordinary measures to work with communities and stakeholders to promote economic and social well-being in the areas in which we operate. As an example, let me cite Rio Tinto's proactive support for Guinea's response to the Ebola outbreak some years ago. A local business resilience team was mobilized with their first priority to safeguard employees and their families by minimizing their exposure. This involved a mass hygiene and prevention program, distribution of over 150,000 sanitation kits, screening at all premises, standing down employees on full pay to reduce their exposure. These lessons were quickly shared and learned by other organizations working in Guinea, and many of those organizations adopted the same practices. As a result, we did not lose any employees to the disease. Our response to the outbreak has attracted international praise, and also including from the UN. So I'm just citing that example to show that companies like us, CII and membership of CII, can do a lot in working with government, with agencies, with non-government actors to try and work both towards prevention and towards crafting solutions for the health challenges that we face. We are seeing a tremendous transformation in India in the way health-related issues are being dealt with. There is a visible change in the mindset prompted by the government's resolve to address fundamental issues around health and sanitation and public health. There is a shift in attitude of the regulatory departments, service providers, and local bodies. This transformation is still evolving, but it holds great promise and creates opportunities for collective action. So while a majority of the health challenges we face are covered under SDGs 3 and 6, health and well-being as well as clean water and sanitation, there are several other factors that affect public health outcomes. Historically, sanitation and water-related issues have been neglected and underfunded. The approaches have been inconsistent or have been fragmented, or as have been the policies which have been sometimes at the state level, sometimes at the central level. But now the scenario has started to change with emphasis on cleanliness and sanitation with initiatives like the Swachh Bharat mission, launched on 2nd October 2014. Sanitation coverage has gone up from 42 to 62% since the launch. Many initiatives for sanitations have been taken like Swachh Shakti, Swachhta Action Plan, Swachh Sangraha Knowledge Management Portal by the Government of India. The corporate sector and CII are participating very actively in significant ways in the Swachh Bharat mission as well. The urban ecosystem is an important factor. Approximately 32% of the 120 crore Indians live in urban spaces, but this is likely to go up to 50% in the next 20 to 25 years. Rapid urbanization, along with failure of the public transport system to cope with the growing urban population, has aggravated the burden of air pollution-related diseases. This is one of the several public health challenges now emerging in crowded urban spaces. Growing volume of motorized transport, power plants and industries, indoor air pollution from use of coal, kerosene for cooking, as well as tobacco smoke, for example, are posing increased challenges to clean air in urban settings. Vulnerable populations like children and pregnant women are particularly impacted. Some groups of people are especially sensitive to air pollutants. Breathing polluted air puts one at a higher risk for asthma and other respiratory diseases. Incidence of these diseases has shown a remarkable spike in urban areas, especially Delhi, if you see. When exposed to ground ozone for 6 to 7 hours, scientific evidence shows that healthy people's lung function can be decreased and they can suffer from respiratory inflammation. Air pollutants are also mostly carcinogens, and living in a polluted area can put people at risk of cancer. It also damages the immune system and reproductive systems. Urban spaces are also challenged in terms of sanitation, clean water, and the ease of transmission of infectious diseases. In considering approaches to creating sustainable urban areas, we have to consider how these risks can be contained and managed in a future where population will inevitably grow, and the challenge of sustainable infrastructures and services will grow as well. The SDG number 11, built around sustainable urban areas and communities, thus has an important link with health in the Indian context. Climate change does too. We know it is bad for the planet's health, it's bad for people's health as well. Effects vary by age, gender, geography, and socioeconomic status. A recent international study by the Lancet Journal analyzed over 74 million deaths between 1985 and 2012 in 13 countries with a wide range of climates. Their conclusions was that many more people, like in the recent past, will be exposed to extreme weather events over the next century than previously thought. And it can be potentially catastrophic risk to human health, and it could undo many years of global health gains. In India, many health issues are directly or indirectly related to climate change. For example, according to a report by the India Meteorological Department, more than 1,500 people died due to extreme weather conditions across the country in 2016, with severe heat wave claiming the largest chunk of the total deaths, followed by flooding and lightning. Crop declines have led to undernutrition, hunger, and higher food prices. Power outages in many remote areas have crippled hospitals and transportation systems when we need them the most. Hotter days, more rain, higher humidity have also meant spreading of infectious diseases, longer allergy seasons, and more respiratory disease. So to fight these problems, we need to come together, pool our knowledge, find better technologies, for instance, on climate, looking at cleaner energy technologies. India is aspiring to be a leader on climate change. Numerous initiatives have been taken and are being taken in this sphere. For instance, India is becoming a leader in the international solar energy space. But we do need to do a much more to drive change and to drive the adaptation required for climate change. There is also a need to, for example, make agriculture more resilient to weather uncertainties and strengthening the preventive side of public health. Health outcomes are an interplay of several factors, and thus managing cause and effect is clearly complex. It is important, therefore, to engage all stakeholders, to connect the dots, and to fill the gaps in our understanding of the relationship between ecosystems, climate change, the environment, and human health. These gaps can be filled only by different organizations, healthcare providers, civil society, academia, corporates, and the government coming together, just like we are in this room today, and pooling our knowledge and efforts to move towards solutions. I hope that this conference brings us together to do just that and advances both the understanding of issues and corresponding development of solutions. Thank you very much, and I wish you happy deliberations in the day today, and we look forward to excellent outcomes from this conference. CII is very pleased to be able to facilitate this conference. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Certainly, the transformations are bound to evolve, and we would be able to do so by connecting the dots. Thank you, Mr. Iyer, for your address. May I now invite Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, to deliver the inaugural address.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iyer, Ms. Arora, and present dignitaries in the hall. Sustainable development goals coming from Millennium Development Goals which we never achieved completely. And sustainable by the very word sustain. Sustain what? Sustain the mankind, sustain the human life, and sustain the planet. Under which circumstances, when vertebrate population today, I think in 40 years, 50 years, if I'm not mistaken, different species occupied this planet Earth in the form of lions, tigers, elephants, all kinds of vertebrates with the spinal cord. And today, 98% of vertebrate population is humans, and rest is only 2%. And can we sustain a planet which has this kind of imbalance? And whenever scientific subjects are being discussed, people link it to religion, people link it to all kinds of things. I come from a culture of association, of civility with environment. Even the religion which is followed, if you go deep into it, it talks about earth, water, space, cleanliness, purity, all those things, and binds people to the environmental issues. Now, everyone cannot be a PhD in understanding of how environment operates, how circle of life gets completed. So certain faith system is created around certain plants, around rivers, around mountains, so that there's a sense of protecting all those things which concern not just human life, but concern the planet Earth. And planet Earth is what we need to work towards sustaining. And if planet Earth can be sustained, mankind will be sustained. But if planet Earth cannot be sustained, mankind is doomed, and mankind is doomed the way dinosaurs got doomed. And what caused the doom of the dinosaurs? It was the impure air. It was what you can breathe and what you cannot breathe. And if certain factors are going to change that balance, mankind will finish in single breath. That is one way of looking at it. Water, I mean, I see a lot of plastic bottles on the table, and I personally am deeply, deeply, deeply against use of water bottles. Simple reason, it is convenient, but it is unsustaining in long run. It is unsustaining for the reason that, one, decomposition itself is an issue, and because it's a wasteful thing, you just throw it in a dustbin. Dustbin goes to the landfill, and in the landfill it never gets decomposed. Whereas glasses, which are going to be reused, refilled, and reused repeatedly, or glass bottles, which will be, again, it's basically silica. Even if it breaks down, it's mixing with the earth. If we look at pure science, then it is sustainable as compared to plastic. Simple things, But in coming future, these are going to be big issues, because in next 10 years or so, 5 years or so, which is not really a very long time, many of us will live through to see that kind of destruction, that probably sea will have more plastic than this fish, more plastic bottles than the fish. And do we want a sea which is filled of water bottles and not the fish? And if fish is not going to be there, we think humans will survive? Answer is no. Our end will also be near, and we will probably meet the end which fish are facing, which lions and tigers have faced, which bears have faced, which so many animal species have faced. End of the day, we may think we are far bright and far more intelligent, but God, creation, and the planet Earth or natural system has its own way of sustaining life. And we are just one of the animals on this planet, like any other species. And if we choose not to allow our intelligence to sustain the planet, we will not be sustained, and our life itself will be coming to an end, the way many other species have ended. And when it comes to sustainability, healthcare is one way, but prolonging health itself is not really healthcare. Preventing disease, yes. So prevention of disease is what we need to look at. Most of the medicine system, in fact, I was talking to a standing committee which came from Central European country just about yesterday. They simply don't seem to understand what is Ayurveda. And for them, it seemed as if Ayurveda was voodoo, which it is not. So I actually had to tell them, look, Newton did not discover gravity. That is your perception. But we have had Aryabhat and many scientists thousands of years ago who have written all this in Sanskrit text, classical Sanskrit text. Unfortunately, you people are not aware because your civilization is only a couple of 100 years ago. And because the civilization itself is a couple of 100 years ago, the science which preceded that is something which is beyond. And when we talk of human life is not just man that you see, but even at cellular level, science, the latest science has started talking about cellular intelligence, muscular memory, all kinds of things. How will that happen? Or even mitochondrial DNA. So if it's not the DNA of a mankind, but every mitochondria itself will have a DNA, and that DNA determines how good your fat-burning mechanism is going to be. So each cell at cellular level also exists. And if, from my philosophy, the philosophy we come from, Panch Mahabhut is what we say. The human life, the mankind, the birds, the planets, all of us are made up of 5 elements. And if those 5 elements balance is depleted or causes imbalance, the ailment happens in the body, the ailment happens around, and what just needs to have empirical data to prove all that. And in terms of empirical data, they say, what are you doing about that empirical data? So I say, well, to begin with, before others patent our science, our compositions, we've started a national patent format. And we've started patenting our own drugs. And we all understand in modern science that curcumin is used for treating cancer conditions. But turmeric is very much part of our daily food that we eat. And over a period of time, that causes sustainability. Yoga, which we are coming close to on 22nd of June. So Yoga Day is again science where you connect body and mind, try and work towards a system of holistic approach towards your own existence, and deal with the imbalances which exist in a particular human body. And even in terms of respiratory disorders, which are basically coming out of air pollution and things. How to build lung capacity. So breathing exercises is one way of doing it. And of course, when we look at empirical data and we look at smart cities, we look at a whole lot of construction activities around, it is not just the motorized transport system which is causing decay of the air, but it is a whole lot of construction activity which also leads to bad air. Because in Delhi, if you measure in scientific data, then you realize it is not the gaseous part of air which is itself a problem, but it is the parts per million, the ppm, the particular size of the particles which are present, and that particular size of element is coming basically from environmental degradation in and around Delhi. Because there is so much of construction activity, nobody is dealing with the wasted debris which is lying all over the city. And that wasted debris, sand, particles, all those things is what we need to recycle, reuse, and reutilize in the newer construction which we are working at. But I don't think it helps anyone to talk about it, so nobody talks about it. And we all call ourselves scientifically oriented people. And which hurts me no end, actually. I mean, mentally, I get pretty agonized when I look at all this. Nobody talks about how we have damaged Aravali, because Delhi is close to the borders of Rajasthan. Haryana used to come in the middle, and Aravali range, by its forest, by its plantations, by trees, used to protect Delhi in the earlier times from all the sand particles to coming into Delhi. But unfortunately, environmental degradation which has been caused in the Aravali range is one of the reasons why Delhi has got this higher amount of parts per million, this ppm particle, but nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about the kind of wildlife damage we have caused. Nobody talks about how red meat causes cancer. Convert it into a religious issue. I mean, when you talk pure science, it should be science. Science cannot be a hostage to the belief system. Biases need to go, and let's discuss science as science should be discussed. Unfortunately, the biases take over. If I say khadi should be used, oh, it's a political statement, what would you expect from a politician? Because khadi was a symbol of freedom movement, so promoting khadi is one such agenda. Owning Gandhi is one such agenda. But the fact is, it is not just that. It is about sustainable development. It is about sustainable development goals, because 1 meter of machine-made cloth utilizes 32 liters of water. 32 liters. Khadi in just about 3 liters. And gives employment to a lot of people at the grassroots. Why should we not promote khadi? Why should we all not decide to wear khadi at least once a week? One dress, one shirt, one kurta, one pair of trousers, and it is a breathing fabric. And you're giving employment to some people, some women who are sitting back at home and have no way of sustaining their family. The biggest drawback in the entire SDG planning, and I have spoken not just here, but at every international forum, I've spoken that. Everybody who I meet, I speak about that. Healthcare, I speak about the same thing. I say, you talk about all the dreamy projects. I have one basic issue. I say, what is that? The basic issue is, how do you sustain human population, which is ever increasing? And without controlling population, you think you'll sustain mankind? Answer is not. And every policy needs to have an element of population control measures. And not just contraceptive, but every other methodology needs to be used. And names of the children need to be connected. We all, as a woman, I'm very proud of the fact the names of the children should be connected to the names of women, because end of the day, it's the mothers who give birth and who sustain children. But why not with men? How many children is that man producing end of the day? Should be found out, should be controlled. Unless you work on these systems, how will you sustain the planet? You just cannot sustain the planet. You cannot give universal health care. You cannot protect every child. You cannot give food to every child. You just cannot achieve what you wish to achieve if the human population goes on increasing the way it is increasing. You need more housing. You're going to pollute airs. You're going to cause damage to the environment. You're going to cut trees. You're going to pollute water, air, everything. So before we take measures to work at cleaning rivers, managing defecation, managing waste, recycling waste, reusing various things, glasses for serving water, and reusing the wasted water, reutilizing the systemic damage which happens because of overcrowding of the cities, giving employment to the people in rural areas, sustaining manure. We all talk about healthy lifestyle and we talk about organic food, pay higher amounts to buy organic food, but not a long time back, but just 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, all of our agriculture, or whole lot of our agriculture, was actually organic because we were utilizing our kettles, sustaining agriculture based on their dungs, and creating manure out of it. It was the done thing. It was organic agriculture. And from where to where have we deteriorated? We've started using chemical like urea. We are coating it with all kinds of things, but today, thankfully, we've started coating urea with neem. Otherwise, all pesticides, everything getting into our food chain, and we are consuming all that. So a sustainable development, which was easily available by having mixed kind of agriculture, cattle farming along with agriculturists using the land and utilizing the dung as a manure, and maybe sprinkling it with little bit of some chemical in between if there is some, 100 grams of potash or whatever, is what we were doing. But from there to 100% urea is degradation, and is causing degradation of land, is causing harm to the environment, and making our lives miserable because all that gets into the food chain and comes inside us. But if I say, oh, protect your kettles, you can't protect, you need to eat them. I think we need to do something about this unscientific way of thinking. Science is not just what people perceive science to be. There could be ancient methods which may look voodoo, are actually not voodoo, it's actually science. Just that somebody needs to put the empirical data on the table. And that is hard work, and that is primary research. Nobody wants to do primary research. Everybody wants secondary and tertiary research because all you need is sit in front of the computer, download few articles, cut and paste, job's done. Nobody wants to talk about the humus content of the soil, how it has depleted over a period of time. Nobody wants to talk. Because if you start talking, you start addressing these issues. Just by an increase of 2% of humus content of earth or sand or mitti as we call it, all across Delhi and NCR, you can actually change the air quality. If the humus content is up to 5%, which normally in any fertile soil is, the moment fertility of the soil increases, there will be all kinds of plants growing in it. It will hold the soil, and less dust in the air. And of course, food for cattle, environmental management, ecological setup improves. Simple things. But the primary research needs somebody to work at all this and even research them better. And when you talk of science, science is not what machine technology or industrialization alone brought. Science is something which existed for thousands of years and sustained civilizations after civilizations. We just need to look at them and work from preventive to curative medicine. But it's going to be a huge burden from GDP to sustainability. If we want a sustainable healthcare system, we need to work at prevention along with cure, and that is the way to look forward. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you, Sri Meenakshi Lekhi, for your inspiring address. May I now once again request Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Mr. Vijay Iyer, and Ms. Seema Arora to release a theme paper for the conference. Participants may please collect a copy of the theme paper from the registration desk post this session. I now invite Ms. Seema Arora, Deputy Director General, Confederation of Indian Industry, to give the concluding remarks.
Good morning, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Honorable Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, National Spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Mr. Vijay Iyer, Managing Director, Rio Tinto India, industry colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here this morning. I was just mentioning, and Mr. Iyer also mentioned, this is a series of events that CII, the CII ITC Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development is doing on sustainable development goals. And this actually leads into our annual summit, which will happen in September. We have done one on partnerships in April. In May, we have followed it up with a focus on health. We also would do one on climate and resource efficiency. So this would be something that will feed into our agenda to look at the Agenda 2030, inclusivity and sustainability. So thank you for being here. I want to thank Madam Lekhi for having come here this morning and given us a very refreshing and a very original viewpoint of how we should look at sustainable development, the roots of sustainable development, where they go into our, evolution, our history, our civilization. I think it's important for us to take stock. I think the very important point she made, it's an existential crisis for us. It's not like, we will survive if the other parts of the ecosystem do not survive. So it's really an existential crisis, and therefore we must look at this very, very carefully. Also look at it holistically. I think she brought that very unique perspective again, that look at everything as a system, as a systems approach, rather than just looking at it as a silo, because there's so many interconnectedness. And how does how can we create more scientific and empirical evidence for the work that has already been done generations ago? I think that's a good challenge for industry. We should debate on this and see how we can bring back those, solutions which existed and find relevance for them, find, scientific evidence for them to be even more relevant when they're needed now. And never were they needed more before than today. So I think thank you, Madam Lekhi, for all of your very original and refreshing insights into it. Thank you, Mr. Iyer. I think you really gave us a very, very comprehensive understanding of the challenges that are there, whether it's climate, air, water, and the situation is bad as we know. Therefore, the agenda for today is to deliberate on solutions and what can be done as well. The Rio Tinto example that he gave, I think, is commendable. really looks at how corporate sector, all members of CII, if they are, creative and are alert and are responsive to all these situations that are going to come our way because of various challenges, all challenges driven by sustainability, whether it's climate or sanitation or air pollution. If the corporates are responsive, proactive, alert, I think a lot can be done by the business sector itself, and which is what CII is all about. Thank you very much. We look forward to a very, very interesting day today, and with all your contributions, I think we will come up with a good outcome, which we will feed into our Sustainability Summit, which comes up in September. Thank you very much. We take a short break now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for summarizing the session. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we conclude the inaugural session. We convey our gratitude to the distinguished dignitaries for their valuable time and presence. We will now break for tea and coffee, which is being served in the pre-function area outside the hall. We will be starting our next session at 11:40. I request you all to bring your tea and coffee inside so that we can resume the next session at the earliest. Thank you. The session on health impacts of climate change. I invite the session chairman and moderator, Mr. Jorge Cuirass, Senior Economist, Health, Nutrition and Population Practice, World Bank, and the distinguished panelists to come upon the dais and initiate the session. The panelists for the session are Mr. Abhik Moitra, Founder and Managing Director, HBT Medical Assistance Private Limited, Ms. Alpa Gupta Mishra, Head, Corporate Sustainability, Tata Projects Limited, Ms. Nehmat Kaur, India Consultant and Development Policy Economist, Natural Resources Defense Council, Mr. Rajiv Tikoo, Director and Editor-in-Chief, OneWorld South Asia, Dr. Randeep Guleria, Director, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi.
Okay, I think we're waiting for one more panelist, but in the interest of time, we'll get started, and he can join us later. So good morning to you all. My name is Jorge Cuirass. I'm a senior economist with the World Bank New Delhi office, working on the health, nutrition, and population global practice. It's an honor, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting the World Bank to this important event. And I have the honor of representing our country director, Mr. Junaid Ahmad, who could not be here. So I hope not to disappoint you too much. We have a wonderful panel, and the way the session is structured is I'll speak for about 10 minutes just to provide some context on the theme of the panel. Then we'll ask each of the panelists to give some remarks for some 8 to 9 minutes each. Then I'll probably ask some questions of the panelists, and we'll make sure we leave enough time at the end for a question and answer session with the audience. So I'll come to the dais for my remarks. Okay, so I only have 2 slides, so don't worry, I'm not gonna subject you to death by PowerPoint, and they're really just to provide a graphic illustration of some of the things I'll be talking about. So, as you heard in the inaugural session, the common thread of this series of events that the Confederation of Indian Industry is putting together is the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you think for a moment about the Sustainable Development Goals, we're talking about a massive challenge that the world has set itself to. I mean, this means we need to feed 9 billion people by 2050. We need to provide electricity access to 1.1 billion additional people, even as we transition from fossil fuels and prepare for 2 billion new urban dwellers while reducing the carbon footprint of cities and improving urban resilience. This is no small feat that humanity has put in front of itself. And if you think about the Sustainable Development Goals, what's at the center of these goals is people. And why it's important to mention these in a panel on climate change and health is because often people think about climate change and they rightly think about our oceans, our air, our rivers, our mountains. But at the center of the climate change challenge, which is perhaps the defining challenge of our times, is people. So anyone who cares about people should care about climate change. And anybody who cares about people and in turn cares about climate change should care about health. Because although the Sustainable Development Goals cover many sectors, each of the sustainable goals touches on health. And just to give some examples, transportation has pollution impacts which affect human respiratory and cardiovascular health. Agriculture and fisheries provide not only nutrition, but medicines. And cities can be at the same time a breeding ground for infectious diseases and also help us improve access and quality to basic services such as water, sanitation, and basic healthcare. And so I just wanted, one of the slides I have is just to help us think about the different channels that climate change affects health or has impact on health. We start with the very direct ones. We have seen with, the outbreaks like Ebola in West Africa, MERS in the Middle East, and the Zika virus in the Americas, the impact that pandemics and disease outbreaks can have not only in human lives, but also in entire economies. And there are very solid evidence, such as a recent report by the International Research Institute for Climate and Society, that suggests that climate change is one of the main drivers of increasing vector-borne disease incidence. If you look at it globally, a warming of 2 degrees Celsius over the baseline of pre-industrial climate could push more than 150 million people to be at risk of malaria. At the same time, diarrhea rates could increase by 10% in some regions. And neglected tropical diseases such as dengue, leishmaniasis, and chikungunya could see their footprints increase since they thrive mainly among the world's poorest populations and are sensitive to climate conditions. As my friend Will Starbuck, who leads the efforts at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to eliminate Kalasar, reminds me, sandfly, which is the vector that propagates Kalasar, can be found now at higher and higher altitudes. So there are diseases which we thought were within our grasp to eliminate, and which India actually has set concrete goals and timelines to eliminate, that will become harder and harder to eliminate because of climate change. So even before we start thinking about other more direct impacts, climate change has very direct and very clear impacts in health. Second, we turn to health impacts that come as an indirect result of climate change changing the environment. And this has to do with more intense heat waves and fires, increase on availability of food, and major natural disasters. We've already seen since the 1980s, the world's poorest countries have been affected by almost 8 times as many natural disasters as they were before. So these impacts, while indirect, they can be massive and catastrophic and need to be taken seriously. And third, we have even more indirect impacts that cannot be ignored that come from the economic and social consequences of climate change, such as mass displacement and disruption of livelihoods, of people living in low-lying coastal zones and small island states, increased risk of violent conflict associated with resource scarcity and other population movements, and slowdowns in economic growth that will exacerbate poverty. I mean, there's already a World Bank calculation that under a business as usual scenario, 100 million more people could be pushed into poverty by climate change alone. So if you think about it, we as the world, we're trying to move in one direction, and it seems like we're making progress. We're eliminating poverty. We are eradicating diseases. But climate change seems to be pushing us in exactly the other direction. So as scientists will tell us, we should care about climate change just by itself. But in addition of the devastating effects climate change has on itself in the planet, the potential devastating effects on people are very clear and should move us to action. So when we come about what to do, how to respond to these challenges, I think there are broadly 2 main buckets of interventions. One, which tends to be overlooked by the health sector itself, is that we need to put the public back at the center of public health. What does that mean? Things that are often neglected, such as provision of clean water and sanitation, vaccination, disease surveillance, disaster preparedness, which are the traditional classic public health functions of governments. You know, these are things that cannot be done by the private sector, need to be re-emphasized and need to be significantly strengthened. And then when it comes to health systems, we have a double challenge. We not only have set ourselves as part of the SDGs these lofty goals of achieve universal health coverage, which means everybody gets the care they need without suffering financial hardship in doing so. In addition to that, we have to add the extra challenge that our universal health coverage has to be climate smart. So not only do we need to increase access and improve quality of health services for everybody, but we have to do it in a way that takes into account climate change. And this comes basically in 2 forms. One is the health systems that we continue to build into the future need to be low carbon. We need to design, build, operate, and invest in health systems and facilities that generate minimal amounts of greenhouse gases. And this sounds a little bit abstract, but I can give you a couple examples of work the state governments in India are doing, supported by the World Bank. In Karnataka, for example, we've partnered with the Indian Institute of Human Settlements to come up with green designs for any new community health center or primary health center that is built in Karnataka. And in Uttar Pradesh, we have agreed with the new government that we're going to completely revamp the outpatient departments and emergency departments in district hospitals in Uttar Pradesh, not only to make them more patient-centered, safer, of higher quality, but also to make them more environmentally sustainable. So these are just examples of how even the healthcare system, as it deals with its many challenges of access and quality and equity, it has to start thinking of itself as a low-carbon sector. The second is, because of the additional threats posed by climate change, we have to build health systems that are resilient to climate change. And that means planning for the threats that a new era of climate impact will have on us, healthcare facilities and healthcare workers are at the front line of dealing with the effects of climate change, and we need to equip them to be resilient to these effects. So in sum, if we care about people and if we care about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to look at the intersection of climate change and health very seriously, and not just as an add-on when we're done talking about all the science and the physical aspects and all the effects. No, it needs to be at the center of the conversation, because these are very real and very immediate threats. Even if we talk about what will happen by 2030 and 2050, already the effects of climate change are being felt today. And if we, in addition to caring about people, we care in particular about the poor and the vulnerable, we have to take into account that the most immediate effects of climate change in health are felt by those most vulnerable within each country and by the most vulnerable and low-income countries, including small island states. So with that as a background, let us move to the panel discussion. So I'll go back to my panel seat. So next, I want to introduce Mr. Abhik Moitra. He's the president and director of High-Beam Global Medical Assistance, as well as HBG Marketing Solutions. He has a past in banking, and industry. He has worked for a number of companies, including Nestle, ITC, ICICI, and Artemis Healthcare. And he's taken that experience over many years of industry to come up with this new company, HBG Medical Assistance, which has come a long way, already has 25 employees. So it's a pleasure to welcome Mr. Abhik Moitra. You have the floor. How much time do I have? 8 to 9 minutes. Okay. So this is how it works. If you go over your time, then I'll ask less questions of you during the next round.
I'll try and finish it in 7 minutes, though. Respected dignitaries on dais, respected audience, good afternoon to all of you. In the previous session, Honorable Parliamentarian Meenakshi Lekhi ji spoke about extinction of dinosaurs. That was about 50,000 years ago because of climate change. A recent phenomena about 7,000 years ago happened when we know that civilizations, Indus Valley civilization, cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa got extinct because of vast floods that happened at that during in the Indus Valley or in the Indus River. So that is the kind of havoc a climate change can play. It can make an entire civilization vanish from Earth. We are lucky that few people remained and the civilization continued. It may not happen next time. That is what climate change can do to any population, to any civilization. In the recent past, in last 1 or 2 years, we have been hearing a lot of issues about pollution in Delhi. Now, we all know that whenever a particular place gets heated up, the pressure drops. Whenever a place is cooler, the pressure is higher, and the wind always flows from the higher pressure to the lower pressure. So as Delhi is hot and Punjab is less hotter, the wind is going to flow from Punjab into Delhi, bringing the agricultural waste, burnt pollutants into Delhi, increasing the pollution. It is also true that there is a lot of construction happening in Noida, Greater Noida, Gurgaon, etc., where the temperature may not be as hot, and Delhi is much more hotter, bringing that pollution carried by wind into Delhi, increasing the Delhi's pollution. That's recent. Last year, everybody was talking about chronic smoker's lung syndrome in children, especially those areas where the metro construction was going on. So when the wind blows, all that dust particle goes into the households and infects the children. And if you look into any pediatric doctor, he will say that any children living near the construction site will have very, very weak lungs. That is what climate change can do to us. We will, I'm sure there are respected panelists here who will speak on the minor issues, but then we need to also talk about how climate change is causing mental health issues in larger population. Just a month back, we were talking about depression as being one of the largest health issues in the world. But just imagine, because of climate change, when an allergy happened to any of the children in our household, he or she fell sick. The parents rushed them to the doctor. Either the father or the mother takes a leave from work and stays back home to take care of the child. And that adds to the work pressure on that particular parent. And it causes stress. Stress causes depression. And we have to add that maybe the similar kind of infections are also happening to the other family members, causing further stress. It is adding to the mental health. When somebody is, when there is a lot of heat, people do not get to sleep properly, and that creates tiredness during the day, further adding to depression. So there is a lot of relationship between the climate change and the mental health of the people. I was reading a particular study saying that wherever the heat is more, people sleep less, and it creates a lot of weakness in terms of health. I'm sure Doctor will be able to add more when he comes to speak next. But these are larger issues that climate change is bringing into day-to-day behavior of us. The day-to-day life is getting affected because of the climate change. We can talk on the minor issues like vector-borne diseases or pathogen-borne diseases, etc., which is causing a lot of infection, allergies, etc., or the cardiovascular diseases. But then cancer or cancer getting created, especially lung cancer, because of the climate change, we can continue to talk about them as symptoms that are happening. But the cause remains larger, much, much larger. And as people, as people who can effect a change, create a solution to this, we need to bring in a consensus how to tackle a problem which is going to become a disaster tomorrow, and we need to work on this today. So I'll leave this at here. I'm sure there are other issues, and we will have much more discussion later during the panel, and we can discuss that there. Thank you, sir.
So that was exactly 5 minutes. So they say what's short and sweet is double sweet. So thank you for that. So next, the next panelist is Ms. Alpa Gupta Mishra. I've been told by the organizers not to give you more details of the profiles of the speakers. So she's the head of corporate sustainability at Tata Projects Limited, and has arrived at that after a very impressive 23-year career in the group. So without further ado, Ms. Gupta Mishra. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to Dr. Abhik, Moitra. I will bring in a different perspective now in my discussion. I'll start with the data which I had collected from the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, which they had made projections for the next century. They've said that the global mean surface temperature will rise by 1.1 to 6.4 degrees centigrade, wherein the warming will be greatest over the land and the high altitudes. Heat waves, heavy precipitation events, and other extreme events will become more frequent and intense. Sea level rise is expected to continue at an accelerating rate. And climate change will affect all animal species, not only just the human population. It will impact the supplies of food and water, freedom from excess infectious diseases, physical safety, and comfort. And climate change will also affect the human health. As per the IPCC third assessment report, it had concluded that climate change projected to increase threats to human health in terms of impact of thermal stress, which is the one we were discussing about the heat waves, death and injury due to the floods and storm, and also indirect impacts would be the range of vector diseases like dengue and malaria, waterborne pathogens, water quality, air quality, food availability and quality. So when you look at this kind of data, how does it impact India? So if you look at the Indian population, you'll see that around nearly 700 million of our population is living in the rural areas, which is dependent on a climate-sensitive sector, which is like the agriculture sector, forest, and fisheries, and also on natural resources, so which is the biodiversity, water, mangroves, coastal zones, and grasslands for their sustenance and livelihoods. So because of the climate change, it will lead to further heat effects, weather-related disasters, putting pressure on the health infrastructure in the country and also impact the livelihood of the rural India. And if I were to give you a small example of what has happened in Telangana, Tata Projects is based out of Hyderabad. So we just read in the news that in 2 of the lakes in Hyderabad, the fishes have died. And the reasons are, they have not done the detailed research, but what has come out is primarily is because of the reduction in the oxygen level in the lake, and also because of the effluent, untreated effluent coming from the industry, which has contaminated the water and leading to death of fishes. So this is one thing which we are seeing as immediate impact of climate change and impacting the livelihood of the rural and the coastal population. So that I feel as if it impacts their health, it impacts their mental stress and also leads to other diseases. There was also a study which talked about, as it was mentioned in the beginning, that the vulnerability to climate change, it is a function of 3 things. One is the exposure, the second is the sensitivity, and third is the adaptive capacity. So I think that learning from all this, what is happening around us, is that we need to increase our adaptive capacity to mitigate these climate change impacts. And in terms of mitigation strategies, if you could look at the few areas, I feel that the areas we could look at is efficient use of energy, which applies to the industrial sector, agriculture sector, because energy is being used a lot in these sectors. Reduce dependence on carbon energy. We need to get into renewable energy, solar-based energy in our production processes, in our infrastructure. So we need to look at construction, which uses a lot of renewable energy. We need to switch to low carbon energy, promote safe use of public transport. Again, a very important thing, and as organizations, we are also talking about carpooling in our organization, and I think most of the corporates are talking about that. We're talking about walking to offices. So smart city concept is basically based on that concept that, you have your offices, your residential areas in the same vicinity, so that you can walk down to your offices. And the adaptation strategies to cope and prevent with the current and future climatic changes are also it's becoming an important need versus just a thinking, level in the organizations. So if I were to refer to one research, I would like to again reiterate the discussion which was started by Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi. She talked about the impact of population. I feel really population really impacts, and it does lead to more climate change because of the increase in the greenhouse gas emissions, and thus impacting a lot of impact is on the demographic and also on the socio-economic environmental things. In terms of the environmental impacts, it's degradation of land and water, depletion of resources, ecosystem disturbances, and disruption of the biophysical systems. On the social side, it is also leading to a lot of changes in the government policies. You can see they are talking about it. The governance, there's a lot of international codes which are coming across in the globally, and also the cultural diffusion is taking place. The negative impact of the population is actually the vulnerability of the children and the elderly people, which is one thing which is negative. And the last is the urbanization. The urbanization has led to a lot of impacts in the health of people who live in the urban India, because most of the land is covered by construction activities and leaving no land for us to get good quality air and good quality water. So this is what I feel is just a perspective on how climate change impacts health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, just 6 minutes, so this is a stellar panel, not only because all the panelists are distinguished, but they are performing according to the instructions. This is a first for me. Next, we have Nehmat Kaur, who's an accomplished development policy economist and is the India consultant for the Natural Resources Defense Council.
Thank you, Jorge. I actually had a slide presentation, but I don't think I want to spoil the track record of our stellar panel, so I think I'll just, with your permission, sit here and give my remarks. I'd also like to thank CII for convening this very important discussion. What I'm going to talk about today is a part of what Jorge mentioned when he was setting the context, disaster preparedness and early warning systems. So just to introduce myself, I'm from the Natural Resources Defense Council. It's an environmental NGO headquartered in New York, but we've been working in India since 2009 on clean energy, climate policy, and environmental health. A big part of our environmental health program is early warning systems on extreme heat and air pollution, and what I want to cover today is our work on extreme heat. We've been working with various cities and states across India, as well as national leadership from the Indian Meteorological Department and the National Disaster Management Authority. But one important stakeholder that's been missing from this work is the private sector. So I do want to highlight the work that we've done and end with the question to the audience of how we can engage the private sector more, because deaths from extreme heat are 100% preventable. There is no need for people to die from extreme heat. And I know that the panelists before me, as well as some of the speakers in the first session, have highlighted that we know that extreme heat has become more frequent, more severe. The fifth assessment report of the IPCC highlighted that heat waves are going to come more frequently and for longer durations. And I'd like to sort of, with that context, start telling my story from the city of Ahmedabad. So in May of 2010, the city of Ahmedabad experienced a devastating heat wave where the mortality, the average all-cause mortality, which is the average number of deaths on the days of the heat wave, tripled. So there were 1,300 more deaths in the city as compared to a normal week. And as part of this, NRDC partnered with the Public Health Foundation of India and the Indian Institute of Public Health to go support the city in developing and implementing an early warning system on extreme heat called the Heat Action Plan. This Heat Action Plan was developed on the basis of scientific evidence, which we collected from the city of Ahmedabad, correlating temperatures and mortality, setting thresholds. There are 4 strategies of the Heat Action Plan that the city developed and implemented. The first is an early warning system and an interagency coordination communication chart. So as part of the early warning system, the city engaged with the Indian Meteorological Department, which provided them with daily forecasts on extreme heat. Now, the city nodal officer, who was from the health department, would send out an alert to all other departments in the city, including the labor department, to send out a notification that there is extreme heat that's expected, so that labor can be prepared, construction workers can be prepared. Their timings can be changed. So the city implemented a big sort of preparedness plan through this early warning system. The second aspect was to build capacity in the medical professionals of the city. And I know that we have medical professionals in this room, we have policymakers, we have the private sector. So it was an intersectoral plan that came together to prevent deaths from extreme heat and illness from extreme heat. The third aspect of the early warning system was increasing public awareness and community outreach. Jorge rightly pointed out that at the center of such plans of disaster preparedness is people. So it's very important to keep people at the forefront and increase their capacity and awareness about climate change, about the health effects of climate change, and increase their preparedness on how they can prevent illness by helping themselves, helping others in their family. We also know that SDG 5 is promoting gender equality. And we have some evidence that suggests that extreme heat affects women more than it affects men. So making sure that we highlight those aspects as well. The fourth strategy of the Heat Action Plan was to promote adaptive measures. And this is where mitigating urban heat island effect, putting in measures such as cool roofs or energy efficient buildings, more greenery and vegetation in the city comes into play. And here again, I just wanted to point out that while we piloted the plan in Ahmedabad in 2013, more than 10 cities in India and more than 5 states in India have adapted this plan and created their own plans. In fact, new aspects to the plans are being added this year through a Cool Roofs program. And the reason I highlight this Cool Roofs program is because this is also one aspect that I have identified where the private sector can play a greater role. So the city of Hyderabad and the city of Ahmedabad have actually implemented a Cool Roofs program to provide affordable cooling, affordable thermal comfort to low-income communities in these cities. They will be, mostly in cities, poor people live in houses that have tin roofs that become extremely hot during heat waves. So this is a measure to provide affordable comfort to that community. We had 2 companies come forward in the city of Ahmedabad as well as Hyderabad and provide cool roof materials in the form of their CSR activities. So this is one way in which I see businesses engaging with cities on preparing communities for extreme heat. So with that, I'll just stop my remarks and yeah, I look forward to the discussion more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We keep with the high performance of the panel. So next we have Mr. Rajiv Tikoo. He's the director and editor-in-chief of OneWorld South Asia. So you have this panel, you have economists, you have doctors, you have industry professionals, and Mr. Tikoo will provide the point of view of a journalist, of a career journalist.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The event began on a very good note and thought-provoking note by Madam Meenakshi Lekhi, who focused on the need for research and generating more evidences, and of course, need for scientific discourse in the country. Mrs. Seema Arora, of course, focused on solutions. I think I'll take off from there and then give a media perspective quickly. That's the only thing I know. I'm not a climate change person, so I'll focus on media, what I know about. See, media can be only an enabler in this case, so as in other areas of life, as all of us know. And media, in its current form, is focusing on health, climate change, water sanitation, and I think it's doing a decent job in terms of numbers. When we look at that, such quote-unquote soft stories are competing with issues like bombs and terrorists and other things. So the number of stories, if you do a bit of a Google, so you'll find that the sheer number of stories has gone up actually on coverage of climate change across the board generally. So you'll have stories on heat waves killing people, cold waves killing people, and of course, Mr. Abhik Moitra mentioned about sleep deprivation also, the newer things which are coming up. And when I was doing a bit of Google before coming here, I also came across a report which said that extreme heat is also going to increase the number of rapes in the world. So people are coming with newer stories. And these are all headline-grabbing stories generally, which media finds very easy to do. They're easily available, their resources are available in the market, and it's pretty simple to do it. But having said that, there are also exceptions of in-depth work which are happening. And these are more driven by individual journalists than by media houses. I would say that these stories are appearing despite media houses actually, because media houses don't put in resources into this kind of work, whether it's doing research or generating evidences or even allowing in-depth stories. Our experience is whenever we award media fellowships on any subject, the first thing a journalist has a problem with is that the office refused to give him official leaves, paid leave. So they have to do it out of personal leave if they are interested in pursuing a fellowship. Now these are short-term, 3-month, 6-month fellowships. So that's the kind of support they're getting from media houses. Media houses have their own challenges, of course, like any other sector. They are shrinking at the same time, also expanding at the same time, so that's a different story altogether. Coming back to what can be done in the given situation. While as they're doing more research and generating more evidence will take its own time and of course more resources, but what is available already is that being communicated by media houses. Now that's something which needs a bit of deliberation. We do have lots of research which is being conducted currently. Lots of evidences are available, but they're available in specific pockets, in specific chunks. And what media houses, journalists actually do is that whatever is easily available, they would reproduce that with whatever value addition they can do, or probably even inserting more errors, unfortunately. The reason is this lack of capacity in media persons to do all this work. They're trained to communicate, but they're not trained to work on specific issues or domain issues. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. And climate change, as it is getting more and more nuanced, more and more complicated, it's a cross-cutting theme. Media houses work in, there's an environment beat. Within that, there's a climate change is just one section. There's forestry also, there are similarly, there's water and sanitation, there's health beat, but nobody is covering climate change across. It's a multidisciplinary kind of an issue. Now, one of the panelists also brought in gender issue. Now, it will be very difficult for them to look at cross-cutting themes and then also bring in gender issue into this. You'll have, of course, stray stories coming in. So probably while it is beyond the scope of this house to enable media to do its job, but definitely this house could deliberate on the issues like whatever is available. Is it available, is available in a usable form? Is there access to data? Is it user-friendly? Is it localized? Is it disaggregated? So whatever is already available in the country in different places, in different institutions, can we somehow make it available easily to people who want to utilize it as their background work to do their job? So probably that would be in the self-interest of the knowledge people here itself, rather than waiting for media to really step up and do it, but as an extension of the work of knowledge people themselves and institutions also, probably a bit of focus on communication at the end of the work is not out of place. You should help to disseminate it better and probably serve their purpose and cause better. And it would also be helpful to look beyond metros also, because there is still some bit of idealism still in small-town journalists, small-town papers who would still like to do work, but they are constrained by lack of access to data, local data, lack of access to people who would talk on local issues actually. It's easy to call up Delhi and talk to one NGO worker or an NGO person, knowledge person, or a researcher, rather than finding a local person who will give a local perspective, while climate change is more a local issue than a global issue for people at the grassroots actually. So we need to look at those areas of interest, how to really make the best of what is already there and how to package it and make it available. Now that's something probably needs a bit of thought also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So with that, we move to our last panelist. You know, I'm an economist working on the health sector, so my situation is I'm in panels full of doctors, and I complain that I'm the only non-doctor. This panel is the opposite. We have people of many professions, but if you're going to talk about climate change and health, you need to have a doctor in the room. So Dr. Randeep Guleria is not only a doctor, but is the director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. I think that needs no further introduction, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to start by congratulating CII for actually holding this meeting and talking on sustainable health, especially as far as the environment and climate is concerned. Climate change is something which is affecting all of us. We're sitting in this room, in an air-conditioned room, we're contributing to climate change. We're also part of what we're causing global warming, because using the air conditioning or using the room itself is causing some degree of global warming. So climate change is something which is part of industrialization. As mankind has sort of progressed and as industrial growth has occurred, especially in emerging markets like India and China, there is going to be climate change, and it's something that we have never really thought of, that as we have grown in terms of our industry, in terms of more vehicles on the road, more buildings, we have not looked at the downside of all of this, and that is on human health. And that downside is related directly or indirectly to diseases that we see in day-to-day practice. So it could be a direct effect, as has been talked of, heat waves. We see heat waves every day. During the summer months in North India, people come with heat strokes to our hospital day in and day out, especially those in the lower socioeconomic status. We have the indirect effects of more vector-borne diseases. Each year we talk about dengue. There's re-emergence of chikungunya. Chikungunya came in the 70s, disappeared from India, re-emerged now because of more mosquito-borne diseases. In various areas where mosquitoes was not seen, we are seeing more and more vector-borne diseases. There's re-emergence of other diseases like Zika or Ebola or the MERS coronavirus, which is another viral disease in the Middle East. All of this is indirectly related to global warming. There's also an effect of global warming because of pollution, whether it be indoor or outdoor air pollution. 60% of India still uses biomass as a form of cooking, and this itself causes significant degree of global warming, whether it be using wood or cow dung. And this number has come down from 80% in the 70s, but at that point in time, it was around 700 million people using biomass. The number has remained the same. So although percentage-wise it's come down, absolute numbers have remained the same because our population has grown in that manner. So I think a lot has been said that there are a number of health effects as far as global warming is concerned, whether it be cardiovascular effects. The fact that we are all living in areas where air pollution is high itself is a risk factor for cardiovascular mortality. There is enough evidence which suggests that living in Delhi itself, where the air quality is poor, is as important a risk factor as is your high cholesterol. We are very much bothered about our high cholesterol, but we have not bothered about the fact that we have lived in Delhi for so many years with such high levels of air pollution, which causes inflammation not only into the lungs, but in our blood vessels, which leads to hardening of our blood vessels, what we call atherosclerosis, and this leads to coronary artery disease and also leads to stroke. So these are the subtle effects that climate change is causing, and we are not really aware of the health effects that it is having. The answer that we need to look at is what can we do? What are the solutions? Because the effect is subtle. If someone dies of dengue or dies of H1N1, the media makes a big issue out of it. But more than 30,000 people die every year in Delhi in winter because of the indirect effects of air pollution. We did a study a few years ago and we showed that when you have high levels of air pollution, in the next 24 to 48 hours, there's a huge number of patients who come to the emergency with acute respiratory problem, with cardiovascular problems, or worsening of the underlying asthma because of being exposed to high levels of air pollution. But no one really looks at it from that point of view. So I think there is a need to increase awareness. There is a lack of awareness in the community, and that's where CII and other partners can come together. We're trying to do something, and from our point of view, we have started what we call a Green School Initiative. We're going to various schools in Delhi, talking to children, trying to make them understand the health effects of climate change, of air pollution, and trying to increase the awareness because we feel they are the future, and if we are able to involve them in trying to increase some degree of awareness in society among policymakers, maybe we can actually bring about a change, because there is a need to bring a change. Unless we do that, we will continue to have more and more health-related diseases, which will be a part of industrialization or industrial growth that is happening in day-to-day life. So this is all that I wanted to say. Thank you very much. I hope I've stuck to my time.
This is truly the first time I've been a moderator in a panel where every single panelist has not only stuck to time, but actually taken on average 5 minutes to convey very rich remarks. And since this is the panel just before lunch, I want you all to think about, Dr. Guleria talked about the risk of high cholesterol and the risk of living in Delhi. So just imagine the risk of high cholesterol while living in Delhi. That's multiplied. And smoking, yeah. Okay, so we'll move to the next stage of the panel, in which I will basically ask a particular panelist a question and ask them to respond. But if any other member of the panel wants to weigh in, please feel free. So we'll start with Mr. Abhik Moitra. So we talked about climate-smart health systems. And I already gave some examples of how the government healthcare sector is starting to move to this. What's the role of medical assistance companies and private healthcare companies more in general in contributing to creating a climate-smart health system?
There are two parts to this question. One, once a person falls sick due to a climate change, what needs to be done then, and how to prevent it is the second part of it. So By having a private sector healthcare participation, by building up many more private clinics, hospitals, which can deal with climate-borne diseases such as dengue, chikungunya, etc. Because our current healthcare system in the government side, we are still hugely short of beds today. So if somebody has a dengue and needs to be admitted, it cannot happen without a private participation. So if you see today, most of the private hospitals also admit people with chikungunya, with dengue, and they participate in that kind of a heat wave related or vector-borne disease related outbreak whenever it happens due to a weather change or a climate change. That's the kind of participation which private sector is already making. The blood bank, because most of the dengue cases need a lot of platelets, infusion, etc., which always and mostly comes from the private blood banks. So that's another participation that is getting done by the private sector. Having said that, by making a smarter health city, by prevention and preventing a climate-borne disease or an outbreak to happen, how can that happen? Giving you an example of Delhi's condition today, Dr. Sabha spoke about today, cardiovascular diseases are on rise because of the climate change that is happening in Delhi. Imagine today we are hotter than Punjab, but less hotter than Rajasthan. But tomorrow, with more industrialization happening, we might even become hotter than Rajasthan cities. And which means today we are getting the waste, burnt waste related pollutant coming in from Punjab into Rajasthan, into Delhi. Tomorrow the dust from Thar is going to come in because again the wind will blow from a lower temperature to a higher temperature. What is going to happen then? Which means every second person is going to have a smoker's lung, even if he is not smoking. So we have to plan. The urban planning comes in very, very important. The role that assistance companies are playing, not only mine, but Practo, etc., etc. When an epidemic breaks out, when a health condition arises in a family, the first thing the family which has never dealt with this kind of a condition before looks for an assistance. What do I do? What do I do next? Where do I go? Which is the doctor who can treat it? We make this information available. That's number one. Somebody who is living in a distance area and needs to be connected to an urban hospitalization, we connect that person to the urban hospital. So these are the kind of assistance that we are providing. Somebody might be having a shortage of money. Then what kind of assistance can be given to him is the information that we bring in. So the medical assistance companies are bringing in more and more information on the table, making it available to a normal man, to a normal person who has never dealt with healthcare before. So that's the kind of educating, awareness creation that we are doing today.
Can I add to that? Two things. One is I do agree that there is a acute shortage of beds as far as India is concerned. But unless we really work on preventive health, we will actually be just sort of chasing the shortage. We'll never be able to meet that. Just to give you an example, more than 90% of diarrheal diseases in our country are related just to unsafe water and bad sanitation. So if we are able to provide just safe drinking water and better sanitation, we will be able to bring down diarrheal diseases by more than 90%. So these are preventive measures which really would help to a large extent. And I think that's where we should actually put our money in terms of prevention is concerned. Secondly, I do agree with you. You see, unfortunately, Delhi and central India, which is part of the Gangetic belt, meteorologically we are in an area where there is it's a landlocked area. So a lot of pollution comes from the northern part of India, whether it be the Thar desert, or like you said, if there's residual waste burning in Haryana and Punjab, that the wind blows more towards this side, especially during the winter months. And this is what happened in the 1 week after Diwali, where we had very, very high levels of air pollution. Because there was this residual crop burning in North India, there was very little wind, and Delhi was actually just filled with smog during that time, and levels of pollution were beyond what could be recorded. If you look at the meteorological data, it showed 999 because it could not go beyond that. So the level of pollution was it was not high or very severe, but it was toxic levels of air pollution that we saw. So these are things that we need to really look at an acute, from the acute point of view.
Okay, so let's go ahead. Yeah.
So I think one more aspect where the private sector can play a greater role is collection of data and reporting back to policymakers. We've experienced that there is huge dearth of morbidity and mortality data and the cause of death related to environmental factors like climate change or heat or vector-borne diseases. With the physicians that I've worked with, they say that, usually the cause of death is written as, cardiac arrest, but it's not actually the cause of death. It doesn't sort of clarify what initiated that process that caused the death. So I think the private sector can play a huge role in surveillance, in disease surveillance, and reporting back so that policymakers can plan better as well.
Just to add one more thing,
Yep.
Dr. Guleria, your views on, I think whatever we are talking about is much more symptomatic approach to a particular disease. I mean, we are not treating the cause, and I remain short of saying that possibly the cost is the population time bomb that we are sitting on today. If we fail to control, we don't only have to manage the population, in fact, we are already much beyond what should it be. So we have to, in future, in next 50 to 100 years, should we not look into reducing the population instead of maintaining it or increasing? Will that be a long-term solution or not?
So it's multifactorial. That is one of the solutions, definitely, because the numbers are huge, and therefore, with the resources are limited, the numbers are huge. So whether it be in terms of food security, water, or environment, it really impacts our numbers. So that is definitely one factor which needs to look at. I do agree with that.
Okay, yeah, so I totally agree with you. I mean, it's a bit shocking for me that come September, the headlines of all the newspapers will be about how many patients were admitted for dengue. But right now, the headlines are not about what the municipal corporations are doing to prevent vector-borne, to prevent mosquitoes from breathing after the rain. So we need to move to that core public health aspect. And just reflecting on what you're talking about, I mean, I don't know if those of you who live in Delhi have reflected upon that week after Diwali. So pollution levels were going beyond what can be measured, but also was the week when Trump won and the week when the monetization was announced. I personally felt like it was the week from the end of the world. I thought, what's happening here? Anyway, that was a deviation, but let me ask Ms. Alpa Gupta. We've had a very interesting exchange about what's the role of the healthcare sector, both public and private, in mitigating and adaptation to climate change. But coming from industry, you talked about the case of Telangana and what you've seen. What are what are the major adaptation measures Tata Projects Limited is promoting, and what's generally more the role of industry outside of the health sector in all of this?
Thank you for that question. Actually, I wanted to answer that. In terms of Tata projects, when we did look at our sustainability strategy, and when we're talking about sustainability strategy, we're not looking at our own existence, but at the entire, the balance in the ecosystem. So we looked at one very important area was, we have in this industry, create a lot of fly ash. There's a lot of waste generated in the industry activities like blast furnace, slag, and others. So in one of our key sustainability KPI, we took up this objective that we will try to look at alternate materials in our construction. So while we are making this concrete, we are trying to use more of now, instead of natural sand, we are trying to replace it with robo sand, the M sand. That's one alternate material. The other way is we're looking at using fly ash and increasing the percentage of fly ash in our concrete making. And third area is using the granulated blast furnace slag. So this is kind of circularity in one way, if you can see, or recycled waste. And also it does help us not to deplete the natural resources. So like there's a use of natural sand, and we know the way sand is being managed in the country, there's a lot of mafia-led sand being used in the country. So that is one opportunity we felt which we can really tap and also benefit the environment. So that is one thing. The second opportunity we as the corporate is looking at, in the government you see there's a lot of action in infrastructure development, and one of the key area they're looking is social infrastructure. In most of the cities, if you look at centuries ago, there were rivers which had real clean water, it had aquatic life there. Today those have been converted into nalas. So we are working on a project which is called the rejuvenation of the Dravyavati river in Jaipur. This is a big project. There's a 47 kilometer long river, and it has been totally become a nala in today's time with lot of, people living along the nala, a lot of industrial effluent coming into it. So in this project which we are working on, we are not only cleaning the river, the nala water, and putting it back into the aquatic life quality, but we are also doing the entire master planning along the entire river so that we can make it more green, we can make the entire city more sustainable, and city would have good clean water around it with greenery around it, which Jaipur was now lacking. So I think developing social infrastructure is again a second area where corporates are really working with the government. The third area which again corporates are really working is on the smart cities. So again, they contribute a lot to reducing the impact of climate change. They help in terms of improving health conditions. And it is a positive way because you are not only developing an infrastructure, but you're making a sustainable infrastructure. And there you could look at renewable energy, you could look at modular construction is another area. While you might be using a lot of bricks in constructing, today we use a lot of fly ash bricks, that's one way. The other is doing a lot of precast based construction and a prefab based construction. So these are limiting the emission of air pollution, reducing air pollution in our construction activities, because as we all been talking in the panel, air pollution. So I think construction really contributes a lot to air pollution. But if you look at these areas of modular construction, alternate materials, we will limit air pollution in our activities. So that's what corporates are doing. On our CSR side, we are supporting the communities where we do construction or where our projects are by providing them RO plants and giving them safe drinking water. So this is not about just giving them free of cost. We develop social entrepreneurs who not only, whom we give the plant, the RO plant, which has 1,000 liters per day capacity, and they run it by themselves. So they also are trained on generating the water, cleaning the water. They give it to the villagers at a price so that they realize the worth of the safe drinking water they get. And they also do the entire operation maintenance throughout the life cycle of the plant. So I think supporting the community on the health side is providing them safe drinking water. At our project site is one of the other initiatives we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's quite a lot. So next, Nehmat, you talked about early warning systems for heat waves, and actually you talked about Ahmedabad and Hyderabad, but in Europe, there's a heat wave in 2003 that killed 30,000 people, who prompted most European cities to create these early warning systems. And the next time a heat wave hit, the impact was much less. So that's clearly, it's a very specific measure of building resilience. Living in Delhi and we worry about air pollution, do you think there's a role for something like an early warning system for air pollution? Is that an idea, a way of creating resilience as well?
Thank you, Jorge. That's a really interesting question. So, modeled on the work that we've done on extreme heat in Ahmedabad, we recently launched, in fact, Minister Harshvardhan launched our Air Information and Response Plan, which is essentially an early warning system on air pollution. So the city of Ahmedabad actually got an air quality index from the Ministry of Earth Sciences. That air quality index provides the air quality index for that particular day, as well as a forecast for the next 48 hours. Using that air quality index forecast, the city of Ahmedabad has appointed someone from their health department to monitor that AQI forecast every day and send out alerts. Now, this air information and response plan also has sort of a five-pronged strategy, including an early warning and alert on expected high levels of air pollution. Targeted activities for vulnerable communities. So Dr. Guleria mentioned that they are sensitizing school children. The city of Ahmedabad is planning to do a school flag program for children in Ahmedabad. They're planning to talk to doctors, speak with private medical professionals as well as government hospitals on how to identify and treat the health effects of air pollution, as well as ultimately explore mitigation pathways, looking at mobile sources and stationary sources to control the air pollution in the city. So yes, definitely. I think there is room, and this would be, Ahmedabad is piloting it, but I think with every new city taking on such action, it will just make them stronger. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, could I just add to that? So SAFA, which is the agency which is doing this, has air quality indices in a number of cities, including Delhi. And they will come out with a color coding system of, good quality, poor, very poor, severe. The problem is implementation of what the information they give. So they will give an information saying that the air quality is very poor. People the elderly and children should stay at home. People with underlying respiratory diseases or cardiac diseases should avoid going out during this time of the day when pollution levels are very high, that when traffic peak is very high. But the challenge that we have is that has to be implemented. The policymakers have to really implement that, which doesn't happen. So, for example, the week that we're talking of post-Diwali, when things were very bad, a lot of things should have come into place automatically to prevent the effect on the vulnerable population, which is what needs to be implemented. That is the challenge as far as I see. The monitoring of air quality indices has improved dramatically in number of cities in India. But using that data to really sort of advise people is something which is lacking.
Just to add, it's not only about heat wave. The climate is not only responsible for a heat wave. What happened last year in Uttarakhand, a cloud burst, is also related to climate. And we should have a disaster warning system in place for such kind of cloud burst as well. Possibly 10,000s of people died in that cloud burst last year because the entire river and the river basin got washed out. And so many people were stuck there. So it's not only about heat, which is related to climate, it's also about the precipitation levels. It's also about the cold, because last year we also faced one of the most coldest days in Delhi, and it created a lot of health-related issues back at home. Every household had a sick child. So it's not only about heat, it's also about the precipitation level, the rains, the cloud bursts, the heat, the cold waves, everything needs to have a warning system. And not only having a warning system, but also what needs to be done once that warning has been issued. We need to educate and create an awareness in the population what needs to be done next. And possibly that is where media can play a very important role.
Apart from the warning systems, there are also community radio stations which have been doing quite a good deal of job in coastal areas and also hill stations. They have been issuing warnings based on the data that comes to them. And of course, it's only when the problem is there, they get the information. But after that, everybody forgets about it very conveniently. So probably there has to be a complete cycle to this. Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree with Abhik and Rajiv that there is a huge role for the media to play, there is a huge role for the city government to play, the private sector, as well as the community itself. Shanghai, interestingly, and there are many other examples, has a multi-hazard early warning system, which is something that hasn't been done in India so far, but I think with the changing environment, with changing environmental health effects, one can consider doing a sort of a compiled, comprehensive multi-hazard air pollution, heat, cold, rain, all of those together as well.
Thank you. So we have 15 minutes left. I had a couple of questions more for both Rajiv and Dr. Guleria, but if you don't mind, can we open the floor for questions, just to let the audience? Yes, please. I'm not sure if there's a mic. And let me just set some ground rules because we have very little time. Questions end with a question mark. So if you have a prepared speech, we can ask the organizers to distribute it later. But So please limit your interventions to questions and specify if you're asking it of a particular panel member so that they can be answered.
Hi, I'm Manas Patnaik. Recently immigrated from the US to India. Again, the question is about how to control pollution. But again, one more simple basic thing that Meenakshi Lekhi ji had told about the bottles over here. Can that be controlled? For Alpa ji and Randeep ji, can the government work with you guys to at least have some private member bill or somebody reach out to them so that they can at least do the small things, take the baby steps, not have to do some big things, the small baby steps like remove the pass a member bill where the bottles can be removed or things like that. Many more things could be done. I'm sure you might be more aware than anybody else in this room. Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, let's go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the point that you made is really very valid. We need to take small steps. And I think like I said, as we've had industrial growth, as we've had newer things, it's whether it be these small plastic bottles which we all drink water from but never bother to see how they are disposed of, or whether it be waste at home. How many of us really look at how we dispose of our waste at home? Do we really divide it into that which can be recycled and that which cannot be recycled? It's not really done in a manner. So these are small steps which can help the environment in trying to really see that a lot of stuff can be recycled and used properly. So even when it comes to using these bottles, can we use some material which can be sort of reused and therefore is not wasted? So those are small steps, but then, like I said, there has to be a lot of awareness. And I also agree that so our industrial growth has occurred towards development as far as our own comfort is concerned. We also need to look at the industrial development for the environment. And a lot can be done in trying to improve the environment. As has already been mentioned, there are a lot of newer technologies, a lot of newer ways of improving, whether it be making the rivers better, whether it be making the pollution less, which we need to start adopting. I mean, what we're seeing today as far as pollution is concerned is nothing new. We all know what happened in London in the late 50s. In 1 week time, more than 4,000 people died in the city of London just because of the London smog. And this was documented, that this is what happened. And because of that, clean air laws came in, vehicles quality improved. It's not that there are lesser vehicles in New York or Los Angeles, but because of better laws or better implementation of laws, if I may put it that way, the quality of air is much better. So if it is possible there, it's possible in our country also.
Can I add something here? So, talking about removing this plastic bottles, today anything can be removed provided we have a replacement for it. So, what is the replacement? Today it's a big industry, it's a big distribution system, a lot of people drink out of plastic bottles. Today, if you remove plastic bottle, what should that be replaced with? That answer needs to be coming in first before we think about, okay, now that we have an answer, let's replace it. So first we need to find out an answer to what should replace a plastic bottle.
Yeah, but that is possible. Plastic bags have been banned in various states and they've come out with environmentally friendly bags. So that is possible. You can have cups which are environmentally friendly. So we have to really look at it from that point. The issue is we don't look at it from the environment point of view. We look at it from a comfort point of view.
I just want to add a small anecdote here that a few years ago, all of our Coca-Cola was out of glass bottles and we would return those glass bottles to the grocer who would provide us with those glass bottles. So that's one solution. But the other thing is we can all start carrying our own metallic bottles and then these plastic bottles would also get replaced.
I think what Abhik ji said was around the economics of it actually, the lobby that is also doing the plastic, that is also playing a part of it.
If I may give another example of economics, the economics, if I may just give a brief example, the economics of tobacco is the same thing. People argue that tobacco should not be banned because it will affect the agricultural part, it will affect the laborers, it will affect the industry, it will affect the tax returns that we get. But there has been a lot of data which shows that the health effect of tobacco, whether it be chewing tobacco or smoking tobacco, both is much more. The price in terms of health that we pay because of tobacco use is much more than what that farmers earn or the government earns because of the taxation. Yet the lobbying that is there for the growth of tobacco industry is huge. And therefore it can never be banned. It's not even been banned in the US, despite huge amount of data showing that it is harmful.
Yeah, so I mean, since economics has been alluded to, I feel like I have to say something. So when we talk about something having a pernicious effect on the public, immediately we think banning. Banning is, but if we think about public policy, banning something is at the extreme, right? There are many other measures, and if you think of tobacco, one of the most effective measures that's been proven in the world is tobacco taxation, right? And here in India, progressively taxation has been going up, and it has the double effect of making smoking more expensive and proven effect of people quitting smoking because of that. But it also brings money into the coffers of the government, which can be used to improve public health. Similarly, plastic bottles, whatever we think about, we need to think about smart ways to sway public consumption in the other direction, rather than banning may actually have the opposite effect, right? And we're reminded of the banning of alcohol in the U.S. in the early 20th century, and how that was a boost for the mafia and so on. So we need to think in a little bit more fine grain. Are there any other questions? There's a question over there. Yeah.
It's not a question. This is for the information. I'm not lobbying for anybody. These PET bottles, they are recycled to the extent of 90%. All the blankets, Reliance is the biggest buyer for these, for recycling. And the Recron, of which these blankets are made, are from these bottles. I'm not lobbying for 90% are recycled.
Hello, it was a pleasure hearing everyone here. I'm from MIT University, so I sort of represent an academic institution here. And as a pharmacist by profession and a pharmacologist, so as students, we've been doing a lot of public awareness programs with students. I don't know if you're aware about International Pharmaceutical Student Federations and various student federations, where we have done programs like adopting villages and doing awareness programs with pharmacy and others. My question here is, we have actually a lot of short of funds when we do such programs, unless we belong to a huge organization or a parenting body who can provide us those funds. Now, coming from MIT University, for example, as a professor, if I want to take up such awareness campaigns, where is it that I can get my help from in terms of resources, not only for funds, but also for example, we do printing materials, we set up our own pharmacies, we sort of collect, non-used medicines, like Sir said. There are awareness programs with schools, so I don't know which are the resource populations who do that awareness programs. We definitely can have the paramedical students participating in that. So can there be a sort of a partnership where we can approach someone directly, we know where to go, because we would really want to make that impact?
So I've been told by the organizers to conclude at the earliest. So let's just answer this question, and then we can close it down.
So I think we have a lot of industry out here. You have to reach out to industry, and sometimes it's important to see how they can support you. Very often there is a lot of what is known as corporate social responsibility, the CSR, which gives a lot of fund for social activities. And if it is a part of a social activity, there is fund available for this. The activity that we're doing, which is what we have talked about, the Green School Initiative, which is also with a college in Delhi University.
Tata or some other group, then maybe I can have my students directed and being part of those already running programs.
Okay, so do you want to give an explicit thing very quickly?
Very quickly, in one sentence. What you can possibly do is, after this program, you can have my numbers. I will direct you to the right people.
Right, thank you so much.
That's a very
Can I
concrete
give
answer.
one contact? For the Tata group, you could look at the Tata Trust. Connect with the Tata Trust, which is head office in Bombay. And if there is a website as well with whom you can connect, because they are focusing on very few areas, okay, looking at safe drinking water, in which Tata project is also supporting them.
Actually, I myself is a recipient of a Tata scholarship for my research work. But then what I understand is, when I, being from Bombay College of Pharmacy also, we had volunteers. But when we try to go to these group for general awareness programs, trust me, there isn't a lot of encouragement.
There is a theme-based, expenditure from the trust. So as I gave you one thing where Tata project is also actively working with the Tata Trust is safe drinking water. So on the safe drinking water, we do create awareness on health and saying that how much you can, save money on your medical expenses if you buy, 20 liters of water at say 4 paise or 5 rupees or something like that. So that's.
Some states have also established CSR cells. So Gujarat, for example, has a CSR authority. You could approach them.
Thank you.
Okay, so just before closing, I just want to say my joke about the week after Diwali is just a joke. It's a personal joke, shouldn't be interpreted as any positioning of the World Bank or anything. It's just to keep the audience entertained. So thank you. It's been a wonderful panel. Not only it was rich in insights, not only theoretical, but concrete examples. And thank you for being such an attentive and serious audience. And with that, let us not stand between you and lunch. I hold back to the organizers for any announcements.
So this was quite an interesting session. Ladies and gentlemen, with this we conclude the first plenary. We convey our gratitude to the distinguished speakers on the dais. We will now break for lunch and request all the participants to reconvene at 2 p.m. Lunch is being served in the pre-function area for the delegates, and speakers' lunch is at Iyer Hall. There are some really interesting sessions on urban air pollution and human health post-lunch, an important factor which affects us nowadays. We look forward to the same enthusiasm and participation from your side. Stay tuned, for the best is yet to come. Thank you. All to the session on urban air pollution and human health. I hereby invite the session chairman and moderator, Dr. Anumita Roy Chaudhary, Executive Director, Research and Advocacy, Center for Science and Environment, and distinguished panelists to come upon stage and initiate the session. Please give a big round of applause. The panelists for this session are Dr. Ajit K. Nagpal, Chairman, Amity Pacific Forum and Chairman, Board of Governance, Ritnan Balved Medical Foundation. Dr. Bharat Inder Singh, Medical Consultant, Confederation of Indian Industry and Consultant, Sports Physician, Max Multi-Specialty Center, New Delhi. Mr. B. Rajagopal, Country President, DSM India. Mr. Bhargav Krishna, Public Health Foundation of India.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry if I really held you up because in Delhi, the moment it starts raining, we know what it does to the roads. And which also means spending so many hours on the roads stuck in traffic, that how much of additional pollution that we are inhaling, that we never really account for when we are talking about pollution and congestion crisis. But certainly that's what we would really like to focus on today. And so let me begin this session, and I'm really looking forward to this and with a lot of excitement, because this is truly the conversation that we would want to have, especially when we're all gearing up for the World Environment Day. To begin with, every year World Environment Day is one occasion when we try and bring a lot of our concerns, worries up to focus. And invariably, it's a very important occasion, especially for the clean air community, knowing that every year we come back and with perhaps an even greater sense of gloom and doom. Because throughout the year, the kind of data, facts, information that we see and we analyze, we try to understand, it only gives you a sense that how the magnitude of the problem and the risk to public health is growing. And this year particularly has been a little bit more worrying because we also got some new information, new results from the ongoing studies across. And so the new global burden of disease estimates, that's telling us once again that how the public health crisis is growing. And the new data that has come now shows that which we already knew, that air pollution is one of the very big killers in this country, that the 5th largest killer. But what the new data is, and why it's making us even more worried, is that today air pollution, as far as we look at it globally, it's killing perhaps the highest number of people even today in China. We are still the second. But even though China is ahead in terms of absolute numbers, but the rate of increase is much higher in India. And another key issue that has come up this year is that it's not only the tiny particles that we have been so worried about for so long, which killing people, but now the new data is showing that there is a new bloke in town called ozone. And apparently the ozone-related health impacts and the people dying prematurely because of that is already highest in this part of the world. So even without us being conscious of that growing and that new problem, we are already in it. So where do we move from here? Because at the same time, the national data that we're getting from Central Pollution Control Board showing very clearly that more than half of Indian cities are already reeling under pollution levels, which is officially classified as critical. We are talking about multi-pollutant crisis today, just not a single pollutant, but several pollutants going up together. And the original myth that only mega cities of India are most polluted, I mean, that myth has been exploded now. Because now when we begin to rank our cities based on pollution, we find that it's now the smaller cities of India who are more polluted than Delhi. So clearly, the constant proliferation of pollution hotspots across the country, that is truly painting a very scary picture for us. But having said that, we don't want to see this occasion, this conversation, as one that only keeps talking about the gloom and the doom. We don't want to be pessimist. And it is more important, I think that is even more important for us today, to focus on that silver lining of action. And it is more important to be optimistic about the change that is possible and how can we drive that change better. And already if you begin to look at what is happening in a city like Delhi over the last couple of years, even though the problem is big, growing big, but if you look at that, especially after that infamous smog, the Diwali smog that we saw last year, that has to some extent galvanized several things in this city. So with a lot of agencies now becoming more and more active, with the Supreme Court, NGT, the government itself, and they're all focusing on that what should be the critical point of interventions that we need to take forward. And some of the big developments this year has been one, the Graded Response Action Plan, which has now been notified by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, saying very clearly and notifying that based on your daily air quality levels, here are the set of action that you'll have to implement. At the same time, now they are focusing on developing a comprehensive action plan, just not for Delhi, but for the entire NCR, looking at each and every source of pollution and drawing up a roadmap for that with short, medium, and long-term measure. Now, these are very big opportunities because simultaneously we know that what has already been implemented in this city Like the trucks that enter Delhi now has to pay a pollution charge. The big diesel cars have to pay pollution charge. There has been a better enforcement drive this year on construction activities, particularly after getting the new regulations on construction and demolition waste from the Ministry of Environment and Forest. The waste burning remains a problem, but the silver lining, as I said, is when we looked at, after the Diwali smog, at the winter pollution curve of Delhi this year. It's very interesting to see that the peak pollution levels this year during winter has been lower than the previous winter. Now, it's too early to say whether we have succeeded in bending the pollution curve or not. We have to go for several more winters to know whether this change that we have started to see, whether that is truly a trend or not. But that also builds the stake in it. It means that if we act, we will see results. But that's all the more reason why it's very important that today, all of us sitting here, we focus on what is it that we truly need to do? How do we build support for hard action? How do we make people aware the public health risk so that they are willing to lend support to the hard decisions that are needed? To deliberate on that, to put this into perspective, I have this very distinguished panel with me. And we would today start this conversation now. We will hear each panelist and the experts that we have on this panel to get a very good and deep insight into the problem, but more important, into the action that is needed. So we begin our discussion now, and we'll just set the very simple rules of the game. That what we'll do, first we'll hear all of us here in just about 8 to 9 minutes each, and then we open it up so that all of you can become part of the conversation. So let me first invite Dr. Ajit K. Nagpal, Chairman, Board of Governors, Amity School of Medicine and Allied Sciences. So sir, you're already deeply involved with the health agenda. And we certainly would like to know that how do you perceive this public health risk and how would you want to chart the roadmap?
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, let me thank CII for this opportunity to share some thoughts with this august audience. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. Certainly, it is not my intent to go and talk and give a presentation, but to share that there's nobody sitting here who is not aware of the pollution and who is not affected by it. There is something which is so rampant across the globe, and it is said that almost 7 million people die every year purely because of atmospheric pollution. Now, knowing fully well that amongst this number, almost 92% of the population affected is from the developing and developed economies. I'm sorry, in the low income and middle income developing economies. And only about 8% of the population or the deaths are in the affluent economies. Now, this is purely not necessarily because of the knowledge of the problem, but also public policy and implementation of the public policy to prevent air pollution. Now, particulate air pollution is the biggest problem that we face every day. And this is purely because of the fact that urban air pollution is associated with cardiopulmonary inflammation, oxidative stress, blood coagulation, and autoimmune dysfunction. Now, this is due to direct effects of air pollution upon pulmonary and cardiovascular systems, and also indirect effects of, I would say, indirect effects due to pulmonary inflammation and oxidative stress. So there are so many issues that come in terms of public policy and prevention of air pollution, which are fundamentally the problem of economics, and that is personal benefit at social cost. Much of our behavior represents a causative phenomenon of creating pollution because of the fact that that's the easiest way we have to live. There are some, our rural population essentially depends on some of the factors that are affecting pollution because of the fact that are inside the house and outside the house. We cook, we use coal, we use other means of burning material that creates particulate matter in the atmosphere. So I would say that a very simple approach of this government of giving LPG to the villagers is a very phenomenal program where it is estimated that 1 rupee's worth of spending will save 10 rupees worth of disease prevention and treatment. This would replace coal burning and also the biomass burning inside and outside the houses across the country. So I would say that there are many other factors in terms of public policy which reflects a cleaner transport, as my chairperson has mentioned, energy efficiency. How do we generate power? We are talking about renewable energy. We have municipal waste management, which is a very, very big issue. We have outdoor emission from households, as I mentioned, and coal and biomass. And we have burning of agri-waste, which is again a very major issue in our country. And forest fires, which are, we can't prevent them sometimes, or we can prevent them. We can say it's a debatable issue. Now, indoor smoke is a very major hazard, and almost 3 billion people cook and heat their houses with using coal and biomass across the globe. I'm talking of 3 billion, which is almost half the population of this world. So CO2, carbon dioxide, SO2, sulfur oxide, we have then suspended particulate matter, we have, and NO2 is a weak correlation with cooking gas, but forced expiratory volume is a measure that you can assess the extent of health hazard due to pollution. I would say that since we have also a time for debate and answer specific questions, and much of the statements that are made are very well known, they're very well documented, and the governments are really finding ways how do we prevent both the emission from the automobiles and at the same time burning of coal and biogas. I migrated in my lifetime from medicine to management science because I got opportunity to build institutions in medical science. But once I had built a few, I realized that unless I understand how the hospital services are used by the population, I would not be able to create them efficiently. So it was necessary for me to go back and understand economics and said, how do we make health policy that people are benefited from the public policy initiatives? So the first lesson that I got was from a teacher in environmental health, and he talked about, can we prevent air pollution to safeguard our health? And the two examples that he gave was, one was London smog, where in 1952 they took away all the coal generating industry from outside London and also created filters for the chimneys for heating. And the second was Californian fog, which is purely because of car emissions. And the emission control law came into force after that. So I would say that if so early in 1950s and 60s, such public policy initiatives could be taken, which were reflected through industrial innovations, why can't we do it now? Thank you so much.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much, putting a great insight on the public health and public policy linkage and the whole wide gamut of solutions that you're looking at, especially clean energy and access to clean energy and renewable energy. But more important, as you said, that already the Western world, they had to go to a disaster to step up their action on public policy to protect public health. Now, do we still wait for the disasters to happen here in India to take action, or can we be preventive? So I think that's a very powerful message to give out, and therefore now I move on to Dr. Bharat Inder Singh, medical consultant, Confederation of Indian Industry and Consultant, sports physician, Max Multi-Speciality Center. I mean, as I'm reading your introduction, it's what it's really kind of very attractive is the fact of the sport physician. Because for us who have been working on air pollution for a long time, we know what air pollution particularly means for the active population. And we want people to be active for health security. We want people to run, jog, and cycle. But at the same time, if the air is not clean, we are also making them vulnerable to disease. But that certainly is a point that we'll look forward to. But more important, given your experience, certainly want to understand the role of the health community to bring people on board to understand the risk and build support for air pollution action.
Thank you. I have roughly 8 pages of typed paper for health reasons that are associated with pollution, air pollution. I'm not going to read all of them out for you. A lot has been said in a very nice manner, but I'm going to definitely read out a couple of things. Firstly, what does particulate matter do to you? I mean, this is for you all to understand and for your colleagues to understand, for your children, for your parents to understand. Irritation in the eyes, irritation in the nose, irritation in the throat, a cough, a little bit of bronchitis, and things like that. A little more of it will cause headaches, will cause anxiety, will cause a lot of other problems. Long-term exposures, heart attacks, strokes, lung cancers, emphysemas, chronic obstructive lung disease, and a lot of other factors. This pollution does not stop here. It goes into your brains, into your nerves, into your liver, and involves everything. Now, looking at the value over there, whether it's worth the pollution or not. I'm going to put something across over here, and I don't know, we can discuss this subsequently. Solution, efforts on pollution is always a very big problem. But prevention of that pollution is pretty simple. If you can prevent that from occurring, you can save so many lives so much better, and you'll make my life simpler. I won't have to work that hard. Let's look, in November last year, they had the half marathon in Delhi. What was the result of that half marathon in Delhi for all the occupants who ran, or all the participants who ran? Roughly 2 spoons of ash into their lungs. 2 spoons of ash into your lungs was what they got. Yes, the body fought it, they went through with it, and things like that. What is happening? The government is trying very hard to bring down the level of pollution. How is it doing it? I mean, there's a lot of introduction into green energy, solar energy, wind energy, other renewable energies to reduce burning of fossil fuel. Exactly that has been put forward over here. It will help a lot of people to exercise and get better health. What else is occurring? They are also making the companies and cars responsible to bring out better models and better things. Also, getting after the construction areas to be a little better off over there. But I have certain data which I would like to bring across over here. You know, what does pollution do? PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5. If it increases, let's say by 10 micrograms per cubic meter of air, what happens? 6% more mortality immediately. A 6% increase in the mortality rate. Roughly, that means a lot of people dying. Now, exposure to PM 2.5 associated with an increased risk of mortality from lung cancer by how much? 15 to 21%. That's a lot from what is already occurring. And heart disease, how much does it increase? 12 to 15%. Now that's terrible. Can you imagine what's going to happen to our near and dear ones, especially our children in the future? What's going to occur? Bad. Medical scientists have now confirmed cancer is not bad luck. Cancer is not bad eating. Cancer is pollution. It's the main cause of pollution anywhere in your body. It goes there. India, in 2014, was reported that air pollution from black carbon and ground level ozone had a crop yield which was 50% of what it was in 1980. So your food is going down, your water is contaminated, your soil is contaminated, your air is contaminated. What does that mean? To me, it means that we humans have disregarded nature totally. We are not in harmony with nature at all. Basically, my impression, and I can be wrong on it, because the criteria for success has changed. The criteria for success is how much money I have, how soon can I buy a Mercedes. See, that's it. Now that thought process in India is bad. World Health Organization has estimated that every year, which was said over there, roughly 7 million people die because of pollution. 7 million. India has the highest death rate due to air pollution anywhere in the world. We beat everybody over there. We are world number 1. It also has more death rates from asthma than any other nation in the world. And especially this is effective for little children because they're immature lung power and their respiratory system, and for the elderly. The elderly not only affects the lungs, heart, and brain, it affects any disease that they could possibly have and makes it worse. I can only tell everybody present here and the panelists over here that please, we need to do something about this pollution part and in a drastic manner. I'm not so sure whether the government making laws over here are going to be followed, because we Indians, to use an Indian terminology, we are jugadus. We'll go around that. We'll show something on the paper and still do the Pollution Act. Or when somebody catches us, we'll pay a bribe and still continue to do it. Somewhere, education in that manner has to go up over there to say, no, this is bad for the future generation. Let's please not do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, it's always so convincing and so powerful when our doctors tell us that what the dirty air is doing to our health. And therefore, for people to hear you, and when I heard that 2 spoons of ash in your lungs